Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about something that's really interesting to me, and it is what moves life. The topics I'm going to discuss today are motivation, willpower, and discipline. How does discipline fit into those two topics? First, I was looking at the difference between motivation and willpower, and in my head, processing the information, I was really seeing how motivation, firstly, is the idea of something that draws you to it. So, you know where your life is, you know where your work, your friends, your family, you know where everything kind of sits. And in life, everything that you know is constantly shifting, very, very slightly, but ever doing it. And on the other side, you can have the idea of where you'd like your job to be, where you'd like your home to be, where you'd like your friends to be in relation to you. And I think that conceptualization of something drastically different from where you are is what motivation is what gives energy to action, for action to happen in life in order for that to be achieved. And I think willpower is that energy. Willpower is the resource that draws life, that creates the life that you want to create. So I was looking at those two differences, and I naturally went to the thought, okay, like what actually motivates us, and I kind of looked at the idea of motivation through the entire living being, and I divided that into three areas: the physical body, the mental body, and the emotional body. And each one of these will have its own needs and wants, and each of these will pull you in certain directions. Um, and you're more like a witness, a manager of where energy is allocated. And it's almost like every time the body, any part of the body, the physical, the mental, or the emotional body has an impulse, it sends signals to you, and each one of these will have some sort of persuasive power to draw you to actually take action on it. So you might, for example, have an empty stomach, you haven't eaten in several hours, and your physical body will send signals to you, send a little memo saying, I'm a little bit hungry, let's go find some food. And in that point, you have the decision to manage that feeling in different ways. And one thing that I'll talk about later on is the habitual nature of desires and how we express desires. So looking at hunger, for example, as we were talking about, you can have the desire to eat something that's very high in calories, which might be very delicious, it might be very full of fat, I mean. And on the other side, you might realize and understand that a bowl of vegetables might be more nutritious and more nourishing to the body. But the body sometimes doesn't know how to make these distinctions, and it takes discipline from us to redirect the desire into a more beneficial or useful area for ourselves. No, understanding that, I realize that it's not easy and it takes discipline to do that. And the level of discipline will dictate to some extent how enjoyable that thing is or not, as well as how like our attitude, our perceptions of those things are. So for in the example of eating again, pulling yourself away from something that you know is delicious but is not necessarily that healthy, and if you have that mentality of like, I cannot eat that even though I really want to eat that, I think you'll create a dysfunctional relationship with that desire, with the natural need of hunger, and you may create problems that are very hard to manage, I think. But looking at discipline and easygoingness, let's put it, it has to be a balance, because you don't want to tipping either directions. If you just go completely easygoing in life, then you create a body, mind, an emotional body that are not fit and they're not resilient enough, and you just be unhealthy and you kind of consider everything in the very immediate short term gain and not really see the bigger picture of life. And I think as the manager of our being, we need to kind of consider and weigh the long term options as well as the short term for a more balanced, a more harmonious existence. In the other hand, if you just go pure discipline, no pleasure at any point, you're going to be putting a incredibly heavy weight of pressure on yourself in every decision that you make. If you put that to the extreme, you may even harm yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally in doing this. Even if the things you push yourself through are good, the stress that you generate in yourself may actually take away from that benefit that you're getting. So if you know exercise is good, and because of that you just become a health nut and you just exercise all the time, you may be doing damage to your muscles, to your joints, to your ligaments, to your tendons, and in that you may take away from the longevity of the body itself, as well as the mental stress of saying, okay, now it's time to dip for the gym again, and I need to get myself pumped up and ready, even though my muscles are still hurting from the last time I was working out. That it's mentally harmful, it's emotionally harmful for you as well. And thinking about that as well, you also have to mitigate the short-term to the long-term goals. I think going either direction at any case is not optimal, and there may not be an optimal case, but if you look at life in the complete long-term thinking, you'll always delay gratification and you'll never enjoy what's happening right here. And on the other side, as I mentioned, if everything is instant gratification, then you may not have a future to enjoy at some point, and then problems might just pile up that you won't be able to deal with and treat properly within yourself. So, looking at these three areas of motivation, I realized that discipline is a hard part in life. It takes a lot to learn, it takes a lot to really embody. So the area of how I kind of understand this is creating habits that are very manageable to begin with, and as a habit progresses, then you can incorporate more and more things. It's like if you're going to train for a marathon, you're not going to do, and you've never run before, assuming, you're not going to do the full length of the marathon in your first training session. You might do a 5K run or even a 2K run. But if you do a 2K run every few days over a very long period of time, then after a while you see, no, 2K has become too easy. And then you push a little bit discipline gauge so you can challenge yourself again, but to a manageable level, and you can do 4K or 5K or 6K and so on until you build yourself up to the length of the full marathon. And that of course takes, time to kind of get to understand yourself and also gain experience in yourself doing that particular habit. If it's a physical thing, you gotta also listen to your body and learn the speed that your body needs to adjust to. But if it's a mental thing, again, it's somewhat similar, but it's a little bit more ambiguous on where the limits are and where the restrictions of yourself, of your point of breakage, let's say, is. So yes, the last point I wanted to make about that is that in doing something new, the first time you do it, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of the willpower that I was talking about in order to actually accomplish that one activity. But the more you do it, the second time you do something, it's a little bit easier than the first. You've already kind of figured out how to position yourself. If it's a physical activity, you already kind of know how to organize yourself if it's like a mental thing. And you know, so on. And the third time will be easier, fourth time will be easier, and so on. And maybe by the 50th time you're doing something, you've already kind of figured out a pattern of doing the thing that works for you, and that creates an energy saving mode of just going through the emotions. But perhaps you know, after a certain point, this becomes so ingrained and there's so much momentum going into that direction of doing that thing that you just, it's almost effortless. But I think on the other side, you know, you've done something 50 times and it's a lot easier to do at the 50th time, but then you've got to a point where you've done something 1,000 times. And at this point, I think the amount of willpower to continue doing that thing for the 1,001 time might be higher than the 50th time. Not because of the habit energy, but because I think at that point you've worn out that novelty factor of something. I think we as human beings, we strive for novelty. We strive for things that are new, that are exciting, that are interesting. And once you've done something 1,000 times, it's almost like you've explored every configuration of this thing. And there's very little room of exploration in this topic. And I think if you're incredibly passionate about something, you know, you will probably continue to find interesting things and you will enjoy the process of figuring it out. And as you do more and more of that thing, the challenge to figuring out interesting things about it increases. But I think because if it's a true passion, I think you just flow through it and you enjoy that process. And even if you spend hundreds of hours figuring out one little task, then it might be a great joy to actually figure out that one task. So yeah, so then the feeling of doing something so much that it gets to the point where the energy level increases again to do that thing. There are interesting ways of adjusting to that, I think. You can, for example, for an artist who does a lot of sketching, and he's done, you know, 1,000 sketches, and he got to that point where it's like, it's getting a little bit too repetitive and he's not enjoying it as much. He can find a different modality of art that incorporates what he's learned from sketching and brings the joy that he's got from sketching into a slightly different area. So for example, he can go into oil painting or perhaps photography or filmography and get a whole new range of tools to do that, to express himself in that modality of art, and gain a whole bunch of new challenges to overcome and again stretch that discipline factor about himself or herself again. And in that way, we build life and we get everything done in life. I think everything we do comes from one of these points of motivation, so the emotional, physical, or mental bodies. It satiates one of our needs or wants, and as we do more and more of these things, we kind of figure out who we are in the process. Because what we are is kind of a blank canvas in a way. We do have personalities and aspects about ourselves that are unique, but who we are is very elusive to us. So I say all of this in a way of exploring myself, and I hope I have helped you in some way to explore yourself as well. If you have any thoughts, any ideas, any reflections on what I've said, share them with me. I'm all ears. I'd love to hear these things. So yeah, in that, thank you very much. I'll leave the video here, and I wish you a lovely day. Bye bye.